Alright, this is a video response for Jaeness, Jaeness, on being a Korean adoptee. Okay, so I'm a Korean adoptee. Little background, I was adopted into a white family with my older brother, who's actually my blood sibling. Okay, he's 3 years older than me. I have a younger sister who's also Korean and adopted, but she's not blood related to either myself or my older brother. I have a younger white brother and a younger white sister, so we got the whole mix going on. Um, you say you go to Drexel. I live about an hour north of Philly. Okay, so I've been to Philly many times. There's a large Asian community in Philly. There's a lot of Koreans actually in Northeast Philly. Great food, stuff like that. So um, really one of the tough things being a Korean adoptee growing up is if you don't have a peer group or a support system of other Korean adoptees or other Asian associations, you're going to have a hard time growing up. Okay, because little background, the way I grew up was I didn't even really like Asian people. Matter of fact, I mean that was my ignorance back then. Because there were certain stereotypes that Asian people had. A, they couldn't dress. B, they all had accents. C, they couldn't play sports. They weren't, the media doesn't, obviously stereotype Asian people very well. So what I wanted to do was really kind of distance myself from those stereotypes. So what I did was I actually was, being Asian, but I was almost discriminatory or racist toward Asian people, where I didn't want to be associated with them, which is, you know, blind ignorance at that point. I look back on that, and that's just a part of my life that I wish I could have changed, for the better. So with understanding, obviously, comes knowledge, and with knowledge comes understanding and power. So it's not, it's absolutely normal to feel different. I think the hard part about integrating yourself into your adopted family is a matter of how well they're willing to give you resources on your background, on who you are, what your culture is, what your identity is, um, making you familiar with that, hopefully putting you in a setting with other Asian people, whether it be Koreans or whoever, so that you don't feel alone, okay, so that you have a support system there, um, you know, when you get discriminated against. One of the really big things is with young Asian people, is, and I'm sure it's the same way with young black people, it's dealing with discrimination from the jump. I'm talking about a very young age, things that, quite honestly, white people don't really have to deal with too much. Okay, so realistically, one of the separating points for my adopted family was at a really young age. First time I got called a chink in school, I really didn't know how to deal with that. All I did was act out in frustration and anger, and I got in a lot of fights as a kid. So, I come home, I talk to my adoptive mom, and, I'm talking about, hey, I got called a chink at school. How do I handle this? How do I deal with that? How do I cope with that? And my adopted mom relates to me a story about how Western Europeans, when they came to the United States, how they were discriminated against because of their ethnicity. And I'm like, man, that just doesn't relate and doesn't do it for me because I look physically different. Realistically, most white people, look relatively the same. Now I understand, obviously, there's differences, and I can tell Greek people and Italian people and, whatever. But what I'm saying is they don't look physically different like Asian people do or black people do. So I think Asians and blacks, and especially blacks, have, you know, the toughest time, in the United States because of that history with slavery. But getting back to the point with being physically different, you're going to go through a whole lot that can't be dealt with, through someone else's imperfect or inability to give you perspective, because my white parents couldn't give me perspective. Even if they were very understanding and compassionate and wanted to care, that's just something they couldn't give me perspective on. That's only something another Asian person can give you perspective on. Period. There's not even a question about that. Um, so, because I can, sit here and tell you that, you know, if someone, a black person came up to me and we were talking about discrimination, I haven't walked a minute or a second in their shoes. So even though I may get discriminated one way, I can't tell you how a black person would feel in terms of the way they get discriminated against, which I think is even worse. But, as an Asian kid growing up, it's not easy. So, But in school, I played, I was blessed in the way that, my dad got me into organized sports at a very early age. I'm fairly athletic. I played, on my high school basketball team, track and field, um, that type of thing. So that made it a little bit easier for me because on the playing field, it's just basically you can either play or can't. Off the playing field, it's a little bit different. I felt a little bit socially, I felt a little bit inferior. Okay. Now obviously I've come around and I can tell you right now that, to this day, most of my associations, or close associations are probably, you know, 90% Asian, three of my roommates in college were all black. But so I think as a person of a separate ethnic minority, you kind of move yourself in a direction of where you feel more comfortable around ethnic groups or minorities, than even, the white majority. So, and I'm not discriminatory. I'm grateful for my parents for giving me the opportunity to grow up here in the United States. And I'm never going to I'm never going to, be ashamed of, how I grew up or say that I didn't grow up in a loving household because absolutely they were loving and caring. They just were maybe a bit misguided. Okay. And I think you find that with a lot of people, going out and adopting, whether it be Asian or outside their race. Okay. I think the most important thing is they have to understand that, doesn't matter all the love, all the caring. They have to enable their kids with resources and a community and peer groups and things like that so that they become integrated and comfortable in their own skin. Because if that doesn't happen, you're going to get rebellious kids, later on. I mean, even more so than just your typical rebellious teenager. You know what I'm saying? Because they're not going to feel comfortable. They're going to disassociate from you. They're not going to identify with you. Okay. And then when they find other Asian people, they're going to obviously feel more comfortable and identify with them than, and they may consider, they may be more comfortable relating to that peer group as opposed to the family structure they have at home. Now, I'm not saying that's for everybody. I'm saying there's two probably main schools of thought. Okay. One is the way I kind of experienced it, and the other school of thought is probably, people who had very seamless, easy transitions. Not easy, but maybe more seamless transitions into their adopted families. All right. So to you, my man, my only thing would be, hopefully I can give you some perspective, but you're not alone in feeling different. Obviously, you are different. Okay. I'm not trying to sugarcoat that. If you're not close with your family, okay, there's obviously a couple things that you can do. Communication is a big thing. I mean, I try to communicate my feelings to my adopted parents, and I think they're just, I just think they're kind of a little blind in their perspective, and they don't want to, they don't want to kind of understand, kind of things that I was saying and trying to pass along. And I don't hold that against them. Okay, it's just that that's a hurdle that prevents us from being real close. Okay. So there's no animosity there. So let me get that off my chest right there. There's no animosity whatsoever. There is a little bit of resentment, going in the direction of, I don't think they really kind of understood what they were getting into, and didn't provide, I'm a late bloomer in terms of getting associated with my Asian heritage and culture. So, that's the only thing. I grew up not really knowing how to be Asian, quite honestly. So, and I love being Asian. There's nothing I'd rather be. Growing up, I probably was, leaning toward trying to be, quote unquote white, but I'm comfortable in my own skin. And I'll probably post in a later video, maybe what needs to be done or maybe experiences that I had growing up being Asian. But hopefully this helped you out a little bit. Hopefully the mic sucks on this, but I try to put more light in the background, so hopefully it's not too